My name's Meghan Stromberg. I'm with Planning Magazine and the American Planning Association, as well as Broadcast APA. I'm here in Washington, D.C. with Carolyn Coleman. She is the director of the Center for Federal Relations at the National League of Cities. We're both here at the Federal Policy and Program Briefing. Thanks a lot for joining me, Carolyn.
It's good to be here, Meghan. Thank you.
I'm wondering if you can, first of all, just sort of give us a picture of what budgets look like. What are the pressures on local governments in terms of the budget?
Well, in terms of the federal government, this is a very critical time for local governments because the Washington policymakers are going to be making some very important decisions in terms of reducing the federal deficit, which we can all agree is an important thing to do for our own personal bank accounts. It's important for local governments. Many of them already have to balance their budgets, but it's also equally important for the federal government. But as they take steps to reduce that deficit, that means they're going to be taking a hard look at many of the federal programs that are important to communities and making decisions about whether or not to preserve those programs or whether they're not a good return on the federal government's investment and potentially cutting those programs.
What programs in particular are at risk? Programs that are important to cities and planners?
Well, there are several that we certainly monitor from the NLC perspective that are key, and I'd say that these are some of the largest federal programs that impact communities, and as they go, so might any of the other programs for local communities. So that would include the Community Development Block Grant Program, the federal transportation, the federal highway programs, the federal airport programs. A lot of communities need to tap the state revolving loan funds for water and wastewater infrastructure programs because we all want quality and safe drinking water in our communities. Environmental programs, brownfields programs, about any aspect of local life or city life, these programs could be touching. They're certainly not providing all of the funding for those programs in the communities because the local level certainly raises its share of revenues to fund those programs, but that seed money can be very important to getting things done perhaps faster and quicker in our communities.
One of the things that planners who are here at the policy briefing this week, one of the things that they're doing is talking to their representatives. How can planners frame the issues in such a way that they can advocate for the programs that are important to them and to their communities?
My advice, Meghan, for planners would be the same advice I give to city council members and mayors who often are doing a lot of good advocating on the Hill. And I would frame it in terms of this is the impact that federal dollar had in the community. And you know that particular member of Congress or that senator, those are his or her constituents. They're the people who vote for him. And so the planners were going to provide just another voice of giving feedback to those members of Congress and the Senate. So I would tell the story in terms of, you know, senator or congressperson, the city of XYZ received a $50,000 grant to do X, Y, and Z in our community. Here's what we did, here's the impact, here are the people who are now being served, or this is how we've improved that community. But help your city, your member of Congress, understand the return on the investment and the value that dollar contributed to their community. Granted, you know, we know that we can't save every program in Congress. They have to make cuts. They're not going to save every program. But just as our city councils make decisions about where to invest dollars, just as the states make decisions about where to invest dollars, the federal government's going to be making those decisions. So a key role that the planner can play is to educate them on the impact those dollars have in the community so that perhaps as the difficult choices are being made, that member of Congress understands if I make this cut, this is the kind of impact, so maybe I don't want to make that cut in the community.
And when we talk about budget cuts, we're talking generally, but we're talking really specifically about the Budget Control Act and the responsibility that Congress has to cut $1.5 trillion from the federal budget. That's this year, and then going forward, additional cuts need to be made. How do local governments need to adjust their spending priorities and their budgeting priorities in that context?
Well, I suspect, and we really have two sets of numbers in play. The debt ceiling agreement that became the budget control law several months ago had really two phases of cuts. The first ones take effect immediately and are figured into the 2012 budget, which begins on October 1st for the federal government. And then the super debt committee, or the joint deficit reduction committee, is going to be looking at cuts that will begin taking place effective 2013. So we really have 2 critical years here of budget cuts. I would say, and my advice to local city officials will be to be doing what I know they are already doing, because they are good stewards of those dollars, is to begin understanding what local revenues they're going to have, and to try to project what might happen to the federal revenue streams. And then, just as they're going to be doing it at the federal level, at the local level, and again, I know they're already doing this, they're picking and choosing and prioritizing which programs they'll be able to go forward with. And unfortunately, and this is really unfortunately because the needs are big in our communities, which programs they're going to have to cut back on.
There'll be some tough decisions.
Very tough decisions.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with us and sort of explaining what we have ahead of us. Hopefully we can talk to you again a little bit down the road to see how well we've done.
That'd be great. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Take care.